All right, hi Emily. Hi everyone. My name is Emily and I'm a recovered alcoholic. Welcome to the Design for Living Big Book study. We will be starting on page 30, chapter 3, more about alcoholism. So most of us have been unwilling to admit we were real alcoholics. No person likes to think he is bodily and mentally different from his fellows. Therefore, it is not surprising that our drinking careers have been characterized by countless vain attempts to prove we could drink like other people. The idea that somehow someday he will control and enjoy his drinking is the great obsession of every abnormal drinker. The persistence of this illusion is astonishing. Many pursue into the gates of insanity and death. Elizabeth, you want to start?
Yes. Hi, Elizabeth, alcoholic. Uh, yeah, this was one of the first paragraphs that I really fully started to connect with when I was introduced to the big book at 14 years. Sorry, 14 years sober. I really got a big book sponsor, and she started to really talk to me about going through this book slowly on the second half of step one and really looking at what I'm dealing with now that I'm sober, because my life sucked. I was crazy. I was in a very bad relationship that I was trying to make work, even though it wasn't working. And I would stay up till 4 in the morning arguing with the guy and writing journaling and trying to figure out why the person's words and actions didn't match. And my whole life started to fall apart around me. I mean, my business was failing. I wasn't getting my bills paid. I had 2 little kids to take care of, but little did I know I had a character defect that I need to make everything in my life work, because if it's attached to me, it needs to be successful. I didn't have a program at all. Zero program. I was a meeting maker who stopped going to meetings. So I was in trouble. Um, but when I saw this, the word obsession, and I have some definitions, I'm not sure where they come from. I don't have the sources noted, but I really like these. An obsession is a thought that outweighs all others. It is a compulsive preoccupation with a fixed idea or unwanted feeling. This book has been telling us over and over that we don't have the power ourselves and that I have to find a power greater than myself. But if my mind is so blocked because I'm trying to make something work, that I'm still in the disease and how it's showing up, right? Because for me, being in alcoholism means that my disease can show up in all kinds of different ways. I'm definitely an alcoholic because of what happens when I drink alcohol, but I can be blocked from this power over all kinds of different, sources like they're in my life. So I'm in trouble when I'm not connected because because I'm obsessed with something else. So sometimes I like to come at this from that angle, um, of how I'm using this tool later in recovery, because I can still do that. I can still be totally blocked. And, some of I've had a situation happen where my entire life just flipped upside down and my program was tested, and so it's easy to fall. What is it? Rest on our laurels. And that we'll get to that at some point, but there's a definition of laurel where it's like a cactus. So if you're resting on it, it's like poking you. Like, it's not good. It's bad. And then illusion is an erroneous perception of reality, something not real. I'm walking around in a world of my own making, and I'm seeing things like, Dolores didn't return my text last week. So now Dolores hates me and I feel bad. And all of these things can lead me back to needing the relief of a drink and keep me in that state, where I'm restless and irritable and discontented with life. I'm walking around and I don't know the truth. I can't even see the truth. It's way over there somewhere, but there's so many filters between me and the truth. And of course, I don't know that any of this is abnormal. I have no idea. This is how I think. I walk around thinking about how you mistreated me, and I'm not getting what I want in life. And it's normal for me, right? And so life is a series of problems for me to solve. And that's all I'm ever doing, is thinking about my own plans and designs. And I have no idea, right? And I'm asleep to all of it. And I just am trying to make my life work, you know? I'm trying to make it work. I'm trying to make it work. And that's what we did with drinking, right? I'm trying to make it work. And it's not working, and I don't know why. And I have all these other reasons why it's not working besides, oh, I made these choices. I did this, right? It's got to be somebody else's fault for sure, you know? And I'm not going to see it. And I've talked to people who fall into that category of constitutionally incapable of being honest with themselves. I'm sure all of us know a person like that, where we're trying to feed them truth and reality and evidence, and no matter what, they won't see it. They refuse to see it because they're still locked into sometimes another diagnosis. Sometimes you meet those people that really can't. They can't, and not a will not, but a cannot. And I've met those people for sure. And you can just have pity on them because they really can't see the truth. But, step one, and we're still in step one in the book, and that's about me seeing the truth and seeing the whole truth, not just, how I drank, but how my life was unmanageable by me. Because when I'm trying to manage, I'm nowhere near a higher power. The higher power is not present in my life. I can't see it. I can't feel it. I'm too busy trying to make everything work, obsessively and not seeing the truth about what's going on. Of course, people around me usually can see it, but I ignore them. Go ahead, Emily.
Yeah, when I first read this paragraph, I just something clicked with me, when it says we have been unwilling to admit we were real alcoholics. I never thought I was a real alcoholic. I know I had a drinking problem, but I didn't want to accept the fact that I, was an alcoholic. Like I could never drink again. And then, someday, somehow, he will control and enjoy his drinking with the great obsession of every abnormal drinker. I didn't think I was an abnormal drinker. I thought I was like a normal one. I thought maybe, okay, maybe a bottle is normal, maybe three. But, I could not stop drinking no matter what. And yeah, definitely step one, um, the second part, that my life was unmanageable. I definitely tried to manage my life in different ways, like changing my atmosphere with different people and, different methods and all that, but I just couldn't. And then the last sentence here, it says, the persistence of this illusion is astonishing. Many pursue into the gates or insanity or death. Yeah, I've definitely seen that around in the rooms, for sure. Like, it's like the insanity, like they get like 30 days and then they go back out and they come back and then they keep repeating it into like a cycle. And then even for like my instance, that's what brought me in was death, I tried, managing my life multiple times and until I, you know, flipped my car multiple times and then died the last time and came back into the rooms, realizing that yeah, I absolutely could not stop drinking until I understood that a power greater than myself could only keep me from stop drinking, just for today. So I definitely can relate to that last sentence for sure, because that is where I was when I first came in. And it's just baffling that we think that we can control ourselves and not have an allergy or an obsession of drinking, for sure. So that's all I have. Do you want to pick up, Elizabeth? You gotta unmute.
Thank you, Emily.
Yep.
So we're on page 30. We learned that we had to fully concede to our innermost selves that we were alcoholics. This is the first step in recovery. The delusion that we are like other people, or presently may be, has to be smashed. Let me see, where is it? Delusion. I love the definition of delusion. A false belief held in spite of invalidating evidence. Delude is to mislead the mind or judgment of, to deceive. And this paragraph is short, but it's so important, and it's still important to me, and I'm 37 years sober. I had to fully concede to my innermost self that I'm alcoholic, and that's for me and me alone. Going through the big book like this, I was taught, my sponsor is from Denver, and she came out of the Fellowship of the Spirit. She said, you need to have a personal relationship with what's in this book. You need to find out why. You need to have the solution of Alcoholics Anonymous. First, you need to find out, do you need it? Are you really an alcoholic, or can you manage your drinking? Can you control your drinking? My grandfather had 2 to 3 drinks every night. And he was so functional. Like, he didn't cause any problems in his family. He held a job. We couldn't figure out, was he alcoholic? He didn't seem to have any of the isms, you know, or was he alcohol dependent? He wasn't having problems in his life, and he was a really, really nice man. Did he get drunk sometimes? Yeah, he got a little drunk sometimes. I mean, they had their cocktails, right? But like, yeah, like we always kind of like discussed and debated this in my family. Like we couldn't figure it out because he wasn't blowing up his life. He wasn't, having all the things like in the top of page 18, where everybody else is mad and he's not succeeding. But this, you know, it's so important that I know for me that I can never take another drink safely ever for the rest of my life. And I know we talk about one day at a time, and I know Nikki here is pretty new, you don't need to think about the rest of your life yet. This is for me. This is I know, right? Because I'm 37 years and I'm still here for a reason. And the delusion that we are like other people or presently maybe has to be smashed. I was confused about that sentence forever because I thought it was redundant. I thought it was a grammar issue, but presently means very soon. It's not going to happen anytime soon. I am not like other people. Are there other people that are selfish and self-centered? Hell yeah. Yeah, there's plenty of them. Are there other people that have a spiritual malady in the world? Yes, absolutely. But I'm the one that has a deadly disease, and I'm the one that has to know that I am doing these 12 steps, all 12 of them, in my life, because I don't want to go back to the first half of step one and succumb to this disease and have it take me out. And I fully believe that I would. There are so many things I didn't have to experience coming in here at the age of 21. I missed a lot of things that other people had to go through, and I believe them. And I usually don't. I'm one of those people that has to go burn my hand on the stove myself about 5 times. Thank God. This was not something that I had to try again. And I thank God for that grace every single day. Thank you that I didn't have to go try it again. I believed other people when they said, it's horrible out here. And every time I saw somebody go back out, it took 2 or 3 weeks for them to get as bad as they ever were and worse. So go ahead, Emily.
Yeah, I definitely had to learn, that I had to fully concede to myself, that I was an alcoholic and that I could definitely not pick up another drink safely or a drug. I mean, I really don't have too much more to add, but yeah, I definitely like this because, I had to smash that idea that I could ever, pick up a drink or a drug. And I now know that this is a lifetime journey, and I have a lot to gain, but I had everything to lose, before I came into this program. And yeah, it took me 20 something years of my life to, figure that out. But once I finally got it, and God intervened, and I was able and willing to admit that and ask for help, then I was able to live happily. And it's just one day at a time, for sure. But it's possible. I've seen people go in and out of the rooms, and I'm just so grateful that I was desperate enough, and that I'm still willing and able to receive and accept that to this day, because this definitely is a deadly disease, and it definitely has changed people's lives. And I've seen people not even come back because they're just not desperate, able, and willing. So that this is just a really good reminder. I really like this. And I'll just read. We alcoholics are men and women who have lost the ability to control our drinking. We know that no real alcoholic ever recovers control. All of us felt at times that we were regaining control, but such intervals, usually brief, were inevitably followed by still less control, which led in time to pitiful and incomprehensible demoralization. We are convinced to a man that alcoholics of our type are in grip of a progressive illness. Over any considerable period, we get worse, never better. Yeah, I've seen people in the rooms, they, had a short little drinking spree, that maybe had a couple months, and then they're done, and they come into the rooms. But, that was just not my experience. I have been drinking since I was 7, and I stopped when I was 23. It took me a very long time to, get this. And, we never ever really gain control. But we just learn how to manage, our alcoholism and our drug usage. That's just how we learn in these rooms and meetings, and learning from other people, for sure. But yeah, that's all I have for this one. It's pretty straightforward, I think. But
I think that you pointed out something really important that people, that go back out, It seems like, yeah, for like a week or two. Looks good. Hey, I got away with it. I know a guy who told me a story once. He was 29 years sober, and I think I might have told that in this big book study. I'm not sure, but he he hurt his ankle, and he was at a friend's house, and they didn't have any pain reliever, so they had tequila though, and it didn't even stop him. Like, he's just like, "Oh, that sounds good." And he tried it, and then of course it went well. So he did it again, and then he said 2 to 3 weeks. And that's what I usually hear. And I like to tell people, like, the first job that you do when you get to AA is find out, are you an alcoholic? You know, read these pages, the doctor's opinion through chapter 3, and really look at the description of alcoholism and see if it fits you. That's so important that I need to know that, because if I am an alcoholic and not any other type of drinker, you know, even a heavy drinker that's coping with a loss or some kind of problem in my life, that I could stop without too much trouble. If I'm an alcoholic who has all these ideas about why I don't need to stop, right? Because that's what happened with me. I didn't get to the place where I actually said, that's it, I'm not going to drink anymore. I was like, oh, I don't need to stop. I've been working so hard. I don't have to just stop. You know, I had planned to only go out for a couple drinks, but once I got out, it was like, oh yeah, I've been working so hard. You know, I can drink longer. And um, but the point is that it is progressive. And I believe that today, because for me today, even though I haven't drank, the pain of living as a self-centered, selfish alcoholic who, you know, still my knee-jerk reaction to life is to think about how I'm affected, you know, and that's something that I continue to watch for in steps 10, 11, and 12. Like, I'm constantly watching for that old character and that reaction to life that wants to think only about me. That is a very painful way to live. And it gets more painful, not less painful. So I know that it's progressive, even though I haven't taken a drink. And I've seen it. I've seen other people, even people like, you know, they only ever tried alcohol, maybe a little marijuana. And I saw a woman go back out. I saw her stop listening to our sponsor. It was crazy. We were both, and she went back out first on alcohol, but within a week she was smoking crack. She had never done that before. I watched this woman lose her entire life, and she grew up with, you know, a nice family, education, money, etc. I watched her lose her 3 children. They got adopted out. I watched her live on the streets and never be able to get this thing back for any significant amount of time. And she died at the age of 50 a couple years ago. And she is such a lesson to me, because, you know, that's also my fear. And what I've heard from other people who've gone back out is, what if alcohol isn't enough? What if I keep drinking and it's not giving me the effect that I want? So I start adding other things. And I'm so grateful that the things that people can't quit, that that are so addictive, right? They weren't around when I was drinking. Like, I'm just feel so grateful for that. And that keeps me here too, right? Because I don't want that to happen to me. Because things weren't really working very well for me by the time I quit. I wasn't getting the effects that I really wanted. You know, I was just sort of dulling my sensations to life. Like, it was just dulling things a little bit, you know, kind of numbing me out just a bit. It wasn't giving me the, you know, the fun and the joy like it was when it started. So alcohol really did stop working for me. So that keeps me here too. But I definitely believe in the progression, because, you know, I like peace. I like to be peaceful and free of resentment. You know, I love to move forward in life where, you know, I'm just not, my brain isn't noisy, you know, and I can't sleep because my brain is attached to something. Like, you know, all of that for me is reminders that I need to keep seeking and growing my relationship with my higher power. I'm gonna get my glasses on here. And I've never seen anyone get better. We had this one guy here, you know, he got to like 25 years. He was like Mr. AA. He had like a huge history collection of AA material, etc. He went back out, and I was just dumbfounded. Like, how is this possible, right? He made it look good for a while. And but no. No, it's not anymore. Um We are like men who have lost their legs. They never grow new ones. Neither does there appear to be any kind of treatment which will make alcoholics of our kind like other men. We have tried every imaginable remedy. In some instances, there has been brief recovery, followed always by a still worse relapse. Physicians who are familiar with alcoholism agree there is no such thing as making a normal drinker out of an alcoholic. Science may one day accomplish this, but it hasn't done so yet. Despite all we can say, many who are real alcoholics are not going to believe that they are in that class. By every form of self-deception and experimentation, they will try to prove themselves exceptions to the rule, therefore non-alcoholic. If anyone who is showing an ability to control his drinking can do the right about face and drink like a gentleman, our hats are off to him. Heaven knows we have tried hard enough and long enough to drink like other people. And yeah, I'm just going to read this one more. Here are some of the methods we have tried. Drinking beer only, limiting the number of drinks, never drinking alone, never drinking in the morning, drinking only at home, never having it in the house, never drinking during business hours, drinking only at parties, switching from scotch to brandy, drinking only natural wines, agreeing to resign if ever drunk on the job, taking a trip, not taking a trip, swearing off forever, with and without a solemn oath, taking more physical exercise, reading inspirational books, going to health farms and sanitariums, accepting voluntary commitment to asylums. We could increase the list ad infinitum. And I definitely realized that, like, I like groups like this where I can mention marijuana because in my final year of drinking, I had switched to marijuana, not consciously, but somewhere I realized like that I was always getting drunk and I was always getting into some trouble. I was always ending up at some stranger's house, don't know where my car is, don't know who I'm with, don't know how I got here. And I realized that when I stopped drinking and started just getting high, plus you could start earlier in the day, right? The rules, right? You're not supposed to drink early in the day. Like I knew that was the rule. You're not supposed to do that. That would be bad. But we could do the wake and bake at college, right? And so when I would wake up the next morning and feel terrible, I could immediately numb out and stop feeling those feelings. But I didn't see any of it at the time. I just thought I liked to party. You know, I didn't really remember making that conscious decision that I'm going to drink less and just get high more often. I don't remember doing that, but when I can look back, because by the time I got to AA, you know, alcohol, like my worst year was age 19, not 21. I was 21 and a half when I got sober. But I can look back at how much I was blacking out and getting into trouble, and that was a little earlier. So somebody pointed out this paragraph and said, well, maybe you switch to marijuana. And then that started to click things into place for me, you know, in this book. It was like, again, you know, physically, I react to alcohol like an alcoholic, but I was also putting other things on top of it to try to not feel the way that I felt, you know, and that makes so much sense for me. Um, but I never remember, so maybe Emily did. I don't remember trying to drink like a gentleman. Did you try to do that? Because I just, my goal was to get drunk. I mean, I don't, but then that was my age too. I mean, like my daughter said once, Mom, everyone binge drinks in college, you know? And, um, and so I often tell people at that age, look around in a few years, you know, if you're still binge drinking and your friends aren't, you might have a problem, you know? Just pay attention. Um, but you know, Dr. Harry Tiebout talks about the importance of an alcoholic hitting bottom before he's open to the solution offered by Alcoholics Anonymous. And I think that's so true. Like I have to find where did I get off the elevator going down? You know, it's okay that I didn't do as much as some people did. It's okay that all the yets that people talk about, I didn't have to do all those. I am just as much an alcoholic as anybody else, even though I never consciously tried to stop and found that I couldn't. I didn't get to that point. I know for sure. I'm the only person in my family. I mean, there's alcoholics all over the place. Let's just put it that way. Okay, so genetically, I was already, if it, you know, if in fact it's genetic, I was already on that list. But I have been sufficiently horrified by my drinking life and where it took me. And I don't want to ever go back there. I don't ever want to find out. You know, I have the same disease as people who have lost their freedom, who've lost their mobility, who've lost their families. I have the same disease. I know that I do. And I'm grateful that I know that today because sometimes the AA asks me to do things that I don't want to do. And the little, you know, rebellious, little defiant, you know, alcoholic personality is like, F you, I don't want to do that. And then I remember, wait a minute, do you want to overcome this disease? Do you want to live in recovery or do you want to live in the disease? And that's such an important question that I have to continue to ask myself as life goes on. Go ahead, Emily.
I laugh at these paragraphs because it just reminds me of the stupid shit that I did before I came in. Yeah, I never stopped. I never stopped, and I never thought, oh, let's just try to drink like a gentleman. I never thought about that. I remember when I was in school, and I would just be, putting water bottles in my backpack and having like booze with me at all times, and I was just sitting there goofy in class and getting in trouble, and all that, and it just kind of reminds me of some of my friends, they're like, well, what is wrong with you? I'm like, I don't know what's wrong with me. And I was just like, whatever, and I just kind of did my own thing. But I like this sentence here. It says, if anyone who is showing inability to control his drinking can do the right about face and drink like a gentleman, our hats are off to him. I never knew what that was. I couldn't go without a second without going anywhere without a drink, whether I was working or I was in school or just hanging out with other people. Like I was never sober, like ever. I didn't draw a sober breath. Like I couldn't help myself. I would go to friends' houses and parties and I would be drunk and, just, I was never considerate. I was always selfish. And, it's that delusion, that I lived for so long that you know, I was just in denial, and I laugh at these methods that we've tried because I've tried some of these and then some. I tried. Okay, maybe I just won't drive and stash bottles underneath my car seat. And maybe I won't stuff bottles in my trunk or in my book bag or um underneath my bed, when I'm going to bed, because I had to have it when I was, about to go to bed, when I woke up, maybe not in the bathroom, like in a drawer, maybe not in a cupboard in the kitchen or, any of that. I laugh because, I've tried everything, and it says we could increase the list in ad infinitum, I could definitely add like hundreds of different things onto this list as well. But that's just some of what Bill obviously, tried. But yeah, and then accepting voluntary commitment in asylums. I've been in and out of mental hospital since I was like 12. So, I just they're like, oh, you don't have a drinking problem. You might have a pill problem. I'm like, well, I have both. But then they would shove more, pills down my throat. I'm like, that's not the answer to that, because they just want to, because psychiatrists are there and they're like, oh, maybe you're just depressed. So just take this pill or, and that, I would find a way to like get some alcohol because, they had alcohol in there. I don't know why, but they did. And I ended up finding it and then drinking it and then, um, combining pills with alcohol as well, So that's just kind of what I get out of this because it just it reminds me of my past self. And I always go back to this example, like my brother can go to a bar and have one beer and he's done. Or he orders beers and he's only like one and a half and he leaves the half. It just like baffles me. It's like how can you leave half a beer just sitting there and then you just walk out of the restaurant? It's just it's funny and it's crazy, but that's just kind of how normal he is, unfortunately. But he's the only normal one in my entire family. So for him to do that and get away with that, like he's just very lucky. But it doesn't matter to me because I'm just very grateful that I have a program today and I don't ever have to pick up a drink or a drug. So that's all I have, and then I will read. We're at the bottom of page 31, last paragraph. We do not like to pronounce any individual as alcoholic, but you can quickly diagnose yourself. Step over to the nearest bar room and try some controlled drinking. Try to drink and stop abruptly. Try it more than once. It will not take long for you to decide if you're honest with yourself about it. It may be a bad case of jitters if you get a full knowledge of your condition. Though there is a way of proving it, we believe that early in our drinking careers, most of us could have stopped drinking, but the difficulty is that a few alcoholics have enough desire to stop while there is yet time. We have heard of a few instances where people have showed definite signs of alcoholism where were we able to stop for a long period because of an overpowering desire to do so? Here is one. Yeah, I when I would try to moderate my drinking, I would definitely try to go to the store and get one bottle of wine and be like, okay, I'm just having one and done. But by the time I would get done with that one bottle, I'm like door dashing like more bottles. And I just definitely could not just have one and done for sure. By the time I was done with three and four, I was ordering more. So I laugh at that too, because I can definitely diagnose myself and know that I just cannot control myself. And I definitely could not stop abruptly for sure, because I just couldn't. And if I'm honest with myself, that is just the truth, because I just could not do it. So that's all I have for that.
So yeah, we got two different ideas going on these two paragraphs though.
Mhm.
Um, how interesting is it that AA is telling you to go drink if you're not sure, right? And this point is also emphasized later on when we're talking about working with others, right? If they're not sure if they're alcoholic and they're only halfway into this thing, like my sponsor, emphasized many times, she said, listen, if they're not willing to do what you suggest now, you're not getting them through the fourth step. So you're wasting your time. If they're not sure, I mean, I don't try to force this on anybody. If you're not sure if you're an alcoholic, go find out. Because it's really important that you know for sure. Because it's going to get hard at some point to do this. Like I said, AA will ask me or suggest that I do something that I don't want to do, kicking and screaming in my head like a little toddler. I was making an example about there was a woman telling lies about me in 2023. Like she literally was. Okay, seriously. And it was weird and it was upsetting, right? I had so many feelings going on about it. Like what do people think? Do they think that, and I was told be nice to her anyway. I was like, what? I don't want to be nice to somebody who's trying to hurt me, right? But like that's my recovery. That's about my recovery and my need to do this 100%, and we're going to run into those people. And that's why I mention it. We are going to run into those people, especially if we do service and we do other things in AA, we try to help people. You're going to get kicked in the shins. And I'm thankful someone told me that. She said, when you're on the front lines, you're going to get shot first. And it happens, right? People want to make you the bad guy of their story because they don't want to look at themselves. It happens all the time. People are like, how do you deal with that? I'm like, because I have a program, I know my side of the street's good. I try to be nice and kind and loving. But if somebody, but I don't necessarily want to be nice to people who are mean to me. But that's what AA asks me to do sometimes. So I'm trying to make that point. Like it can get hard. And do I really believe in this? Do I really believe that I need this? That's where you really need to know for sure. Do I need this solution? Right. So it's important to be sure, right? And then the next one, I think I do fall into this category. I was able a little bit somewhere else it says, whether or not somebody can quit on a spiritual basis depends upon how much they lost the power of choice and drink. And I believe that I did get here young, and I like to make sure that is my story that I share because there are other people like me who maybe said, I didn't have to go through as much. I mean, the first time I read Bill's story, I was like, maybe I'm not an alcoholic. I didn't do all this stuff. Oh my God, look what he's going through. Um, but this is where I am included in the book. I came to AA, I had friends in AA. I quickly saw that when I didn't get drunk and do things I felt bad about, that I was feeling better, and I loved it. I love the language of the heart. I love people sharing who they were and being real. I hadn't heard that. I grew up in a world where people talked about what thing, it was what was on the surface and what was on the outside and whether or not you had a Gucci purse or belonged to a country club, right? Now I'm hearing people share from the heart and I'm so grateful all the time that I just loved AA and I stayed, and I found out you don't have to go and do all those things to qualify as an alcoholic. You don't have to do that. You quit. It's like an elevator going down and you can get off at any floor. You get to do that. I still need to be sure, and I am sure that I'm an alcoholic.
Mm.
My sponsor said we don't have to just look at the drinking, we look at the feeling and the thinking and the feelings of the people in the book. And that also qualified me for sure. And we're going to talk about some stories here in a few more pages, which I'm excited about. Um, let's see. And I love where it says, you know, they were able to stop for a long period of time. And we're about to talk about somebody like that, about that, right? Do you want me to read that?
Yeah, if you want to.
Well, guess what? I've stopped for a really long period of time. A lot of people here have, right? We're able to do that. um, I love when people say, but I can stop for like a month. I'm like, yeah, I know. I bet you can. A man of 30 was doing a great deal of spree drinking. He was very nervous in the morning after these bouts and quieted himself with more liquor. He was ambitious to succeed in business, but saw that he would get nowhere if he drank at all. Once he started, he had no control whatsoever. He made up his mind that until he had been successful in business and had retired, he would not touch another drop. An exceptional man, he remained bone dry for 25 years and retired at the age of 55 after a successful and happy business career. Then he fell victim to a belief, which practically every alcoholic has, that his long period of sobriety and self discipline had qualified him to drink as other men. Out came his carpet slippers and a bottle. In 2 months, he was in a hospital, puzzled and humiliated. He tried to regulate his drinking for a while, making several trips to the hospital meantime. Then, gathering all his forces, he attempted to stop altogether and found he could not. Every means of solving his problem which money could buy was at his disposal. Every attempt failed, though a robust man at retirement. He went to pieces quickly and was dead within 4 years. This case contains a powerful lesson. Most of us have believed that if we remained sober for a long stretch, we could therefore drink normally. But here is a man who, at 55 years, found he was just where he had left off at 30. We have seen the truth demonstrated again and again. Once an alcoholic, always an alcoholic. Commencing to drink after a period of sobriety, we are in a short time as bad as ever. If we are planning to stop drinking, there must be no reservation of any kind, nor any lurking notion that someday we will be immune to alcohol. And I laughed when I saw out came his carpet slippers in a bottle. That's not social drinking. Like, come on, he's already playing. It's just kind of funny, right? It's like carpet slippers in a bottle. Oh my God. But yeah, this no reservation. Do I have any reservation? And that's a question that sponsors will often ask somebody early on. Do you have any reservations that you can drink again? Have you really looked at the truth? If you're in step one, it's not supposed to be fun. I need to see the truth. And I'm grateful that I believe stuff like this because I do believe again in the progression of it. And I have seen people and I've worked with people who said, but I don't understand. I drank normally for 40 years and then I went through a divorce and I started leaning on alcohol more heavily and then I couldn't stop. And I've seen people, it was like they were holding a loaded gun all along and they didn't know that then they walked across that line, that invisible line where now I don't have control. And I can tell you that I am terrified of that myself, because I was able to pretty much quit easily and walk in here. And I'm so grateful for the people that told me how hard it was for them. And I believe them. So go ahead, Emily.
Yeah, I think it's funny how, he remained bone dry for 25 years and then when he retired, he picked back up. That kind of reminds me of, when sponsees go back out for me, they think that they did a thorough first step and then they go back out and they're like, oh, I wonder why. It's because you just were not completely, honest with yourself that you think you were done and you were not done, and then you use any kind of excuse to pick back up. Um, yeah, I like how it says he was puzzled and humiliated. Well, it's kind of like we wonder why. It's because, we were just not, willing to go to any length, regardless of what we go through, to not pick up a drink. That's what I was told early on in recovery. It doesn't matter what goes on in life. Just do not pick up that first drink because that's all it takes. If that liquor, or whatever you drink hits your mouth, and that's it. Even if you have it right in front of you and you're not picking it up, then you're good. But if you pick it up or you put a pill in your mouth or whatever you do, it's always that first action. We will not have that obsession and that physical allergy until we do it. And then we just start obsessing over it. We can obsess over it, but if we do it, then that's a different story. And I do like once an alcoholic, always an alcoholic, regardless if we're recovered or not. We will always be an alcoholic or a drug addict or, whatever, we're not cured. This is a daily reprieve only. We live day by day, contingent on our spiritual maintenance. If we don't pray to God, then we're not gonna, get some type of relief that day. We're gonna be irritable, restless, and discontented. Above this story, I put cunning, baffling, powerful, because it is. We think we have it in the bandwagon, and then we don't. And that's because we stopped doing everything that we're supposed to do. Call our sponsors, go to a meeting, work our steps every day, work with a sponsee. When I realized that I stopped doing these things, that's when I really is like, oh, maybe a drink will help. But it definitely does not. And then, yeah, when it says he was dead within 4 years, that's kind of what happens when some people just don't make it back to the rooms. I've seen that happen. Unfortunately, I've had some sponsees, commit suicide after they went back out. They put a gun in their mouth and just, ended it for themselves. And that's just kind of how deadly this disease is. And, it's very traumatic. And it's devastating. So that's kind of what I got out of this, because, it's just a constant reminder that, if I stop doing what I'm doing, then this is possibly what could happen. And I would definitely not make it back into these rooms. I would be dead for sure. I don't think God would, spare me one more time. This was my last chance, I think. And, I'm doing it to the best of my ability, but I don't plan on doing that, obviously, but you never know. But, hopefully not, by the grace of God. But that's kind of what I got out of this paragraph. Got anything? Or you may read?
No, that's good.
All right, we're on page 33 in the middle. Young people may be encouraged by this man's experience to think that they can stop as he did on their own willpower. We doubt if many of them can do it, because none will really want to stop, and hardly one of them, because of the peculiar mental twist already acquired, will find he can win out. Several of our crowd, many men of 30 or less, had been drinking only a few years, but they found themselves as helpless as those who had been drinking 20 years. To gravely affected, one does not necessarily have to drink a long time, nor does the quantities some of us. This is particularly true of women. Potential female alcoholics often turn into the real thing and are gone beyond recall in a few years. Certain drinkers would be greatly insulted if called alcoholics, are astonished at their inability to stop. We who are familiar with the symptoms see large numbers of potential alcoholics among young people everywhere, but try and get them to see it. And then there's an asterisk down here that says, true, when this book was first published, but a 2014 US/Canada membership survey showed about 12% of AAs were 30 and under. You want to share on that?
No, I don't have anything on that.
Hmm. Yeah, I definitely agree with the women and the young people thing, because a lot of people I know, they're young and they're women that come into these rooms, and I can see it now, especially me as a young person still, like a lot of young people now come into AA. It's not just a bunch of old people anymore. It's like a variety of young and old and middle aged. There's a lot of young people groups in my area as well now, and I kind of just see that, it does not discriminate anymore, and or did not discriminate, but we have special young people groups, so we all can kind of relate to each other. And I like going to those meetings,
That's a
but
good point.
yeah.
If you're young, you can look up the YPAA groups or suggest that to alcoholics that are younger.
Mhm.
Because I know for me, I needed a social life too. And I always tell people get three kinds of meetings: one where you learn, one where you can help, and one where you can get a social life. And it might be three different meetings. And here, the really popular one was the Sunday night, um, 8 o'clock meeting at a certain church, and that, and thank God for those people. Like, I needed people to spend time with, because I was only spending time with people who were drinking at that point. And I like to tell young people, like, get out there and there's a guy that was in our group, and we hardly ever see him anymore because he got involved in person. My home group is online, and it's like, that's what you need to be doing. He's like, I'm sorry, I never see you anymore. I'm like, no, 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 no. Like, that's great what you're doing. So, like, Googling what, YPAA, but suggesting that to young people is very helpful.
Yeah, absolutely. You want to read?
Yeah.
Okay.
As we look back, we feel we had gone on drinking many years beyond the point where we could quit on our own willpower. If anyone questions whether he has entered this dangerous area, let him try leaving liquor alone for 1 year. If he is a real alcoholic and very far advanced, there is scant chance of success. In the early days of our drinking, we occasionally remained sober for a year or more, becoming serious drinkers again later. Though you may be able to stop for a considerable period, you may yet be a potential alcoholic. We think few to whom this book will appeal can stay dry anything like a year. Some will be drunk the day after making their resolutions, most of them within a few weeks. For those who are unable to drink moderately, the question is how to stop altogether. We are assuming, of course, that the reader desires to stop. Whether such a person can quit upon a non spiritual basis depends upon the extent to which he has already lost the power to choose whether he will drink or not. Many of us felt that we had plenty of character. There was a tremendous urge to cease forever, yet we found it impossible. This is the baffling feature of alcoholism as we know it, this utter inability to leave it alone no matter how great the necessity or wish. And I mentioned that quote earlier, whether someone can quit upon a non spiritual basis. And the reason why is because in my story, um, I look back at the first 14 years and a lot of people in AA were into self-help programs and books and therapy and all this stuff. And I had a flimsy read of an idea about God, but I definitely wasn't relying on a God. I was making my own decisions. I was my own God, my own manager. And I was doing pretty well for a while. And then I crashed and burned between about 11 and 14 years sober and found my big book sponsor who took me through this book slowly and showed me what the 12-step program had to offer me. But I believe that I was able to quit on a non-spiritual basis because it had not become such a way of life for me to drink that I was physically dependent. I did have some withdrawal, I had some insomnia, but I like to tell people that because I am so grateful that I landed with this person at 14 and a half years sober. Um, because she told me like you're really lucky. You didn't have to go back out and drink because I've seen so many people have to do that because they tried to stay sober. If I'm not using the AA program in my life, I'm staying sober on self-knowledge. That's it. If I'm just visiting meetings, I'm a tourist in AA. I'm not practicing these principles in my life. Can I stay sober on that? Yeah, probably on a good day. On a good day, yeah, I can do that. Okay, what about if your life falls apart? Somebody dies, you get divorced, you lose a job, and it says it in the book, right? You already read it, page 14 and 15. If we fail to perfect and enlarge our spiritual life through work and self-sacrifice, we can't survive the certain trials and low spots. And I'm so glad that I know that today. And I've been through those trials. I've been through many trials in sobriety. And there were times that I thought, that's it. I'm in so much pain. I'm going to go get drunk. And something saved me each time. It's probably about 3 times that I can remember where something happened that saved me, Um, but the idea of leaving liquor alone for a year, that didn't even compute in my mind when I was still drinking. Like, well, why would you even like the immediate defiance, right? That alcoholic ego is going to jump up there and go, well, why would anyone need to do that? Oh no, I don't agree with that. I'm going to start dismissing these ideas immediately, right? And not even my ego's not even going to let me know that I'm doing it. Like it's my ego loves to just hide everything from me. And so I would be like, well, that's stupid, right? I would just start dismissing that as an idea. Like, what do you mean? Why should anyone have to try to do that? And I remember reading this in early sobriety and thinking, well, what the hell? Who can ever do that? Why would anyone want to do that? Well, think about that, right? I mean, hello, take one substance out of your life for a year. This substance that's destroying everything in your life, right? Probably, causing a lot of problems, and there's something in my mind that doesn't want to think that I should maybe not do that. That should be a problem, right? And I love it when people said, if they come up with a magic pill that you can take and then you're not an alcoholic anymore, would you take it? It's like, well, if I'm willing to take that risk, that already tells me I'm an alcoholic, right? Because why would I risk that for that, you know? And I'm grateful today to say that, the idea of drinking, I mean, usually has absolutely nothing to offer me at all. Yeah, that's it for that for me.
I don't have anything to add. We'll just open up the room. You kind
Oh,
of
we
just
got
said
that
it
time?
all.
Oh,
Yeah, we
wow.
got time. Okay.
Dude, we went over.
All right, let me stop the recording.